Hello everybody, hope you're doing well. So today I want to talk about the 4 ancient weapons in One Piece. I know what you might be thinking, Sawyer, what are you talking about? There's only 3 ancient weapons. And to that I would say, I think that's what Oda wants us to think, so that we don't see the 4th one coming. It's something that I've been giving a lot of thought to, so I just want to let you know where my mind is at. Now, a chunk of the stuff that I'm about to say is me bouncing off of this video right here. It's actually in Spanish, and it has a lot of really good points. So I'm going to be using that video as a springboard to present to you a cohesive dish of potential spoilers regarding the ancient weapons. I mean, that's kind of what everybody on YouTube who talks about One Piece does anyway. We just kind of bounce off of each other. So anyway, there's this idea floating around that I don't think is new, because I saw a post about it on Reddit that dates a while back that says that the 3 ancient weapons are actually composed of 3 parts. So contrary to popular belief, none of the ancient weapons is just one thing each, which makes sense if you consider that 2 of the main themes of the story are teamwork and connection. So in order for the ancient weapons to fulfill their purpose the way that Joy Boy intended them to, each of them have to be comprised of the following 3 parts. Number 1, a giant beast. Number 2, a ship. And number 3, a royal family member. If any of these 3 parts are missing, then the ancient weapon cannot fulfill its purpose the way that Joy Boy intended. Which is why after finding out the truth about Joy Boy's story and Laugh Tale, Roger and his crew came to the conclusion that they were unfortunately too early to do anything about the sinking world. Now, in order to illustrate this point further, I'll be using the ancient weapon that we know the most about, which is currently Poseidon. So in this case, Shirahoshi would be the royal family member, and the beast, in this case it's beasts, would be the sea kings that she can control. The Noah arc is obviously the ship part of the equation, which we know exists primarily to be towed or pulled by the sea kings so that it could reach the surface so that fishmen can live in harmony together with the races of the world under the same sun. So we have the 3 parts here. The giant beasts are the sea kings, the ship is the Noah, and then the character of royal blood is Shirahoshi. Now when it comes to Pluton, the ship part is pretty self-explanatory. We've known that Pluton is a battleship from pretty much Water 7. The beast is obviously Sunisha, because you need the power of the elephant to be able to tear down the borders of Wano and unleash Pluton onto the world. And then the royal family member would be Momonosuke, because just like Shirahoshi can control the sea kings, Momonosuke can command the giant elephant. Another thing that connects Shirahoshi to Momonosuke is that they're both connected to characters from the Void Century. Shirahoshi is a descendant of the ancient mermaid princess that was friends with Joy Boy, who used to be alive in the Void Century. And then Momonosuke is Toki's son, and Toki was born during the Void Century before jumping forward in time. And if you remember, one of the first things that Toki says when we meet her is that she really needs to get to Wano. Now, at one point, when they're sailing aboard Whitebeard's ship, Odin pretty much says, I don't think that this ship is going to be going to Wano for a very long time, to which Toki replies that it's fine, because just being around Odin makes her feel like she's already reached her destination. And so that pretty much heavily implies that she was just sort of looking for a member of the Kozuki clan to be able to birth an heir and keep the lineage alive, pass down the genes. That's also why we get that scene in Wano where Momo's reading Odin's journal and he tells Shinobu that he just realized through reading it that he really must not die, because again, the ancient weapon doesn't work without him. Now, something that we already suspected but got confirmed all the same via Vegapunk's snail-paced message is that the energy source that was used to fuel the ancient weapon that wiped Lulusia from the map is the Mother Flame. Now, something that I think is worth repeating here is that I believe that the source of the Mother Flame is Luffy's heart. I believe that those fire powers are a representation of inherited will passed down from Nika to Joy Boy to Luffy. We actually see Luffy's fire powers functioning underwater, just like we see the Mother Flame burning in the tank. And to a lesser extent, we can also connect the same fire power to Sanji, and how essentially Sanji got his fire powers due to, I believe, some Lunarian DNA being in his genes, but also Sanji's heart and his feelings, but then also due to his mother's will. And again, we also have that scene in the anime where Luffy whispers to Momonosuke long distance, and he gives Momo the ability to breathe fire. It's very similar to when Shirahoshi calls on the Sea Kings for help to stop the Noah, and one of them says that it was because she was inspired by Luffy's determination to do so. So again, that highlights this idea of Luffy having this figurative and literal flame burning within him that never goes out. Additionally, in film Red, which in retrospect I think held a lot of clues about future developments for the story, we actually see Shanks lighting up his sword on fire. And the reason why I think that's relevant here is because, as we know, Roger entrusted Shanks with his straw hat. And so if it turns out that the straw hat symbolizes the sun, it would make perfect sense for Roger to pass it down to a kid that he saw showcased signs of this fiery will. Or to use Whitebeard's terminology, the flame that will never be extinguished. Now, before I move on to Uranus, this is the part of the video where I'm going to say something that's kind of controversial, or at least it's not a popular held belief. Up until very recently, I actually thought that the weapon that was used by Imu to destroy Lulusia was Uranus. And so I do not believe that anymore. I think the main reason people believe that this was done by Uranus is because we saw the lasers come down from the sky, but then also via method of elimination, since we were told that Pluton is in Wano and we know that Poseidon is in Fishman Island, it makes perfect sense for people to believe that the weapon that was used on Lulusia is the remaining third weapon, which would be Uranus. Unless there's actually 4 weapons instead of 3, which is what I'm about to propose. I'll try my best to make it all click by the end, I promise. So when the revolutionaries first learn about the Lulusia incident, Ivankov's first conjecture is that an ancient weapon was probably used to wipe it out. Now, apparently, Ivankov knows enough history to reveal to us Imu's last name, but he doesn't know enough history to speculate on the name of the ancient weapon that was used to wipe out the island, which is fine. It's not a big deal. What is a big deal, though, is that even Vegapunk refers to the weapon that was used as an ancient weapon. So it's still pretty vague, and this guy is supposed to be the smartest man in the world. I mean, this guy even read the books from O'Hara. Vegapunk even says that he's aware of the fact that the weapon's power came from the sky. So the fact that he's not saying something like, maybe it was Uranus, especially when the majority of the fandom already believes that to be the case, makes me think that the reason for why Vegapunk doesn't say that he suspects that the weapon was Uranus is because it actually wasn't. Another reason for why I don't think that the weapon was Uranus is because just like there's a mythological connection between Poseidon and sea creatures, there's also a mythological connection between giants and Uranus. See, in Greek mythology, Uranus actually gets mutilated and his blood falls down from the sky to the earth. And the blood drops that fall down to the earth end up birthing the giant race. So in Greek mythology, Uranus is actually considered to be the father of the giants. And since we know that the giants are all about being honorable warriors, I find it very difficult to believe that the government just took Uranus from them and then they haven't waged war against the government since then. I feel like they would have done something already to try to take Uranus back, if that was the case. Or at the very least, we would have heard about them vilifying the government instead of just hearing about how they vilify somebody like Big Mom. And that brings me to my next point, which is something that I've said repeatedly over the years, but it's worth repeating here anyway, which is that I believe the reason why Big Mom was so upset about Lola not marrying Loki is because she knew that getting Loki on her side would grant her access to the ancient weapon Uranus. So yes, in case you're wondering, Loki is the royal family member that is needed for Uranus to be unleashed and achieve its purpose. Another reason for why I believe that Big Mom had info on Uranus is because she made an alliance with Kaido. At first they were both trying to kill each other, and then we cut away from the fight, and all of a sudden they're like, oh buddy, let's go and take over the world together. Now it's heavily implied in a bit of dialogue that Kaido has with Yamato that the reason for why he chose to take over Wano in the first place was because he was influenced by Higurashi, who told him that Pluton was hidden in Wano. So I think what might have happened during their fight is that both Big Mom and Kaido let it slip to each other that they each had knowledge on the location of an ancient weapon. So I think they were probably both like, wait a minute, you have info on one, I have info on one, let's team up. Let's go for the One Piece. Because they're both pretty selfish characters. They didn't just team up because they were friendly. No, they were actively trying to get something out of each other for their own convenience. So if Big Mom had info on Pluton, Kaido would have just been like, yeah, so do I. Now, something else you might bring up here is to say, wait a minute, how do you necessarily know that it was info on Uranus that Big Mom was using as a bargaining chip to team up with Kaido and not info on Poseidon that she was using? And to that I would say, well, because we know that after Whitebeard's death, Fishman Island became Big Mom's territory, which means that she literally had Shirahoshi under her domain and she just didn't care. Or rather, she just didn't know about Poseidon. I mean, when it came to Fishman Island, the main thing that Big Mom cared about was collecting a tax in the form of sweets from its citizens. So again, when it comes to the royal family member in regards to Uranus, Loki was the one that Big Mom was trying to get on her side so that she could gain access to that ancient weapon. Now, when it comes to the giant beast in regards to Uranus, the video that I referenced in the beginning made a really good point. He basically says that each of the animals that correspond to the weapons have to fit the environment that the weapon is referencing. So in Poseidon's case, for example, right, the sea kings are sea creatures. that fits perfectly. In Pluton's case, Sunisha is a giant land mammal. That fits perfectly. So it's land, sea, and air, right? So air, that's the only one we're missing. So the beast for Uranus has to be a giant air creature, or at least a creature that knows how to fly. Now, I already made this point in another video about how, in addition to leaving God's Valley with a baby rat fetus, something else that the Roger pirates might have taken with them was the giant egg that we see aboard Roger's ship that we never see hatch. And if that's the case, it's incredibly likely that the animal or the beast related to Uranus is in that egg, or was in that egg. And so the video that I referenced in the beginning makes it a point to say that we already know what the flying animal in the egg is. And the thing is that even if it turns out that it's not that, I think it's just such a great idea that it just needs to be shared more, because it fits perfectly. So basically the theory is that the animal that hatched out of that giant egg, which is a key component to Uranus's functioning, is a giant beetle. Throughout One Piece, we've seen so many little moments that showcase Luffy's fascination with beetles. They're a huge part of Japanese culture, especially for kids. They catch them and make them fight each other for fun. Rumor has it that that's kind of what inspired the creator of Pokemon to create Pokemon in the first place. We've seen the Tontara use them in Dressrosa as vehicles for war. It also connects with Heracles and Usopp, with Usopp wanting to become a brave warrior of the sea and potentially having a major role in Elbaf. Usopp has the Kabuto, which is, supposed to represent kind of like the horn of the stag beetle. And then his master, or his tutor, Heracles, his design is based off of a Hercules beetle. At one point during Jaya, Chopper asks Luffy what's better, beetles or the One Piece? And Luffy just kind of really struggles with the question. He can't really decide, which is even funnier if you buy into the theory that the One Piece can't really come about without the ancient weapons, which is why the Roger pirates, after going to Laugh Tale, were not able to accomplish their mission, because a lot of the parts belonging to the ancient weapons weren't born yet, or they just weren't ready yet. I'm just going to share an author comment from Oda that I found while I was researching this. It's from a color walk. He says, "When I was in early elementary school, I entered an art contest and won the top award. The theme of the contest was future dreams. So I drew myself riding on a gigantic stag beetle. Its eyes were shining as it flew through the city at night. It was totally awesome. When I stood on stage, proudly receiving my award, I saw the other winning entries on the wall, and I was stunned. Everyone else had drawn things like myself as an office worker, myself as a nurse, myself as a police officer. Was that the point? Once I realized the theme, I felt embarrassed by my mistake. But all of the adults smiled and praised my drawing. Nowadays, I remember their smiles more than I do my embarrassment. Thank you all for your support." Okay, now when it comes to the ship part regarding Uranus, we obviously haven't seen it yet. I believe that it's hiding somewhere in a sky island or somewhere in the sky still. And I also think that it runs on electricity instead of fire. The reason I believe this is because not only would this serve to bring Enel and Uruj back into the story, but it also opens up the door for the Minks and their electro powers to be used for more than just trying to attempt to overthrow Kaido and Wano. We also know that the Minks and the Kozuki clan were friends from a very long time ago. So if the Kozuki clan has access to Pluton, has knowledge on Pluton, it would kind of fit for the Minks to have some degree of information on Uranus or something to do with Uranus as well. Uranus running on electricity would also involve Nami using Zeus and her exceptional navigational skills and weather reading capabilities in the final war as well. Plus, since we know that we're already going to get Loki and Elbaf because Elbaf is based off of Norse mythology, it should be pretty much a given at this point that we should also be getting something related to the character of Thor, who is the god of thunder.
Okay, so now that I've established the reasons for why I don't think Emu has Uranus, the question still remains, then what weapon does Emu have? And I think the answer is that it's Pluton. I know at this point you're probably like, wait, how can it be Pluton if we were already told that Pluton is in Wano? Okay, so let's look at what we know about Pluton. So according to Crocodile, one shot of Pluton is enough to destroy an entire island. And as he says this in the anime, the animators added a bit of animation there showcasing what that would look like. And it looks very similar to what we saw happen in Leloucia. Something else we know about Pluton is that it was originally constructed / built in Water 7. Now, this is important because Water 7 is really close to Enies Lobby, which is where that giant hole that perfectly matches the one left after the Lelucia attack currently exists. And we pretty much know by conjecture at this point that using the weapon back then ended up messing up the tides around Water 7 as well as around Long Ring Longland. Something else we know about Pluton is that as far as we know, it's the only ancient weapon that can be replicated. There's this whole plot point during the Water 7 saga about how CP9 is looking for the blueprints of Pluton. Eventually, it's revealed that Frankie was hiding them, and he ends up burning them. Now, before doing so, Frankie says that the reason for why the blueprints exist in the first place is because the original architect of the weapon feared that the weapon would fall into the wrong hands, and so a second weapon of the same type would need to be constructed in order to stop the first.
And so what I'm kind of getting at through all of this is that I think that that has already happened. I think Imu took control of the original Pluton back during the Void Century War and used the weapon to blast that hole into what we now know as Enies Lobby. The fact that Water 7, which is where the weapon was originally built, is so close to Enies Lobby also goes along with the logic that we saw during that conversation between Imu and the Gorosei. One of the Gorosei asks Imu, "Why are you choosing to nuke Lelucia?" And Imu says, "Because it's close." Also in Water 7, we get this flashback where Spandam goes and talks to the Gorosei, asking them for permission to be allowed to look into the blueprint situation. And for the most part, like, the elders don't really seem alarmed. Like, they don't seem overly concerned with what Spandam is saying in that scene. They seem pretty chill. They're like, yeah, okay, I guess. Go and find those blueprints then, and then get back to us. So if we consider what I've been saying, that at that point in time, they already had the Pluton ship under their control, then their reaction to what Spandam is saying would make sense, because they don't really need the blueprints, they already have the ship. Granted, they would still want to prevent pirates from getting their hands on the plans and recreating the weapon, so CP9 was sent to Water 7 on this undercover mission that lasted several years. Now recently, I think that Oda has been flirting with this idea of Rob Lucci possibly changing his ways, having a change of heart against the government. There was this whole moment recently where Lucci asks Mars not to kill Kaku, and Mars just kind of calls Kaku an insect and flies off. So I think it'd be kind of cool if the thing that pushes Lucci over the edge is that he finds out that the government already had Pluton, and that this 5-year mission that he was on in Water 7 wasn't really that important, or not as important as he thought. He'd be like, "You sent us on this mission for several years, even though you already had the weapon in the first place?" And then the Gorosei would be like, "Yeah, because you're insects." Dang, just saying that kind of hurt my feelings a little bit. So in simple terms, I think that Imu has the original Pluton, let's just call it Pluton A, and I think that the Pluton that's hidden underneath Wano is Pluton B, which means that the one in Wano was built after Imu got control of the first one. Another reason why I think this kind of fits is because when Cobra is dying in that scene with Sabo, he kind of thinks back to Lily's letter, something that she wrote in her letter. So I'm just gonna read you what she wrote. She says, "The poneglyphs must be protected. Bear the flag of the dawn against the sinking world." What I like about this is that we already know that Imu felt betrayed by Lily's actions, and we also know that the poneglyph that says where Pluton B is located in is in Alabasta. So it's kind of like Lily giving Imu the finger in a way.
Now, going back to the pattern that I established in the beginning of the video, the original Pluton should also have these 3 parts to it. The ship, again, is pretty self-explanatory. The royal family member in this case would be Imu, although technically he or she is not the rightful heir, and proof of that is that they're not able to create the mother flame, so that's why Pluton wasn't used for a very long time, because they needed to wait for Vegapunk to be able to learn how to replicate a fraction of that power. Now, when it comes to the giant beast of the equation, this is an idea that I read a very long time ago. It's not my idea, it's from Greg. His Twitter name is Oshimusha108, and he lives in Japan, he knows Oda personally, and what he said a long time ago is that the shadows that we see in Thriller Bark are actually the shadows of a second elephant, just like Sunisha. Now, if you base the comparison that I'm about to show you on the visuals that we get in the anime, the comparison doesn't work, because the way the anime shows it, it almost makes it seem as if there's like a peak with glowing eyes. So I don't know if that was supposed to be an intentional misdirect, but if you actually look at the manga page that features the shadows, that panel matches this panel
perfectly, which is the first time that we see Zoe in full. Now, another reason for why there being two elephants fits is because in an SBS, Oda essentially confirmed that the fictional species of elephant that Sunisha belongs to was inspired by Salvador Dali's work of art called The Elephants, which features two giant elephants walking towards each other. I'm pretty sure those two elephants are going to reunite by the end of the story. So we have one elephant with one Pluton in paradise. We have another elephant with another Pluton in the New World. Poseidon is in the middle, right? Because Shirahoshi is underneath Marijoa, underneath the red line, and then Uranus is in the sky. So if you think about it from that perspective, that creates like a 4-point thing, like a quadrant as well, just like the coordinates that you need to get to Laugh Tale. Another reason for why there being two elephants checks out is because near the end of Wano, we are shown that the Gorosei are concerned over whether or not Zoe has left the area, because they know that the elephant is needed for the borders of Wano to come down and unleash Pluton. So maybe the reason they know that in the first place is because they used one of the elephants in the past to take control over the original Pluton. In addition, having two weapons on opposite sides of the red line also fits with the idea of the red line being destroyed by the end of the story. We already know that a blast from Pluton can create an earthquake, so if Pluton A gets hijacked by the Straw Hat Alliance during the final war and gets fired here, and Pluton B gets fired here, I think the simultaneous power of both weapons being fired at the red line at the same time could probably start a chain reaction that would end up toppling the structure. And if Reverse Mountain collapses this way, then Broken Laboon can reunite in a more cathartic way. Frankie's dream ship will be able to sail across the sea. And then if Sanji contributes to the collapse of the Red Line by using his Mother Flame powers to charge up one of the Plutons, then all you need is Shirahoshi to convince the Sea Kings to move away or erase the Calm Belt forever, giving Sanji access to a sea where all blues intersect, known as the All Blue. Also, if Uranus turns out to be the moon or something like it, then Uranus could essentially control the tides so that the water isn't too high or too low. And so that way we could gain access to the previous land masses that existed, or the previous landmass that existed before the Void Century flood. And this would allow Nami to complete her dream of being able to draw a map of the world. By the way, as Momonosuke hears Vegapunk's speech in this chapter, he says something pretty interesting that goes along perfectly with the stuff that I've said today, and that is this panel right here. And so he says, "What? Does that mean Pluton is..." And if I could complete that sentence, I would add that he probably meant, does that mean that Pluton is already in the hands of the world government? Something like that. Because remember, he's listening to Vegapunk talk about the weapon that was used to erase Lulusia. So I just thought it was very fitting. Finally, just to conclude, I kind of get the impression that the speech is going to end with either the Ancient Kingdom name reveal or an emu face reveal, or both. And that is going to do it for me today, guys. I hope this video was to your liking. Take care. Have a great week. Catch you later. Bye.